7th class. Okay, so good morning, everyone. My name is Jesse, and I am with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. For those joining us for the first time, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. Right now, we are joined by 7 classes live from across North America, so I want to give them a chance to do a bit of a shout-out before we introduce our speakers. We've got Miss Langer's grade 3-4s in Coburg, Ontario. Hi, guys. Hi. We've got Miss Gary's grade 2s in Woodbury, in Minnesota. If they came in from art, yes, they have. Hi, guys. Hi. We've got Miss McNeil's, like everybody, the entire school in Lethbridge, Alberta, in. Hi. We've got Miss Alexander's grade 1s in Trenton, Ontario. Hi, guys. I like how you all jumped up with excitement. That's awesome. Miss Brady's grade 6s in Festus, Missouri. Someone's in 7 there. That's hilarious. Miss Wagner's grade 4s in Freehold, New Jersey.
Say hi,
Got your video working too. I love it. And Miss Reeves, last but not least, 3-4s in Leamington, Ontario. I don't know if their mic's working, but they're in. Awesome. Okay. Hey, they're in. Okay. So the reason you guys are all here today is for our speakers. We are joined live from the Vermont Institute of Natural Sciences, an amazing facility that works with live animals as ambassadors to tell amazing conservation stories. And excitingly today, they're here to tell us a little bit about owls and show us some owls live from their facility. I don't want to interfere with any of that. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to the 2 Annas at the Vermont Institute. Thank you so much for joining us today, ladies. And we look very forward to seeing your amazing animals.
Thank you, Jesse. Hi, guys. It's good to see you. It's good to be here. My name is Anna. I'm one of the environmental educators here at the Vermont Institute of Natural Science. And this is my colleague, whose name is also Anna. Yeah, we're both named Anna. We're also both originally from New Jersey, so shout out to the New Jersey classroom. Hello there. Yeah, so I'll give you a little bit of an introduction about who we are. As the Vermont Institute of Natural Science, our main goal is to motivate people to care about the environment. And we do so in a bunch of different ways. We do a lot of education work. So if you come and visit us here in Quechee, Vermont, right here in central Vermont, we do on-site programs with our animal ambassadors every single day. And our goal is to teach people about these animals so that they'll develop an appreciation for them and thereby want to care for them, want to take action in order to help them preserve them in their natural environments. We also do a lot of outreaches. So we'll go and take our animals around to various schools and libraries. We go to festivals. We go to ski resorts. That's a big thing here in Vermont, ski resorts. Yeah. And we host summer camps in the summertime and field trips during the school year. So we have a big outreach program. And we've been doing these programs with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants for the last couple of months. So it's, you know, an even better way to reach out to people far around the North America. Yeah. Another thing that we do here at VINS is some avian wildlife rehabilitation. So we have a bird hospital right here on site. It's actually through the windows behind me right now. And we see about 500 bird patients every year. These are wild birds like American robins, like Canada geese, like barred owls, chickadees, everything you think of, down to the tiniest little hummingbird that need help. They were found on the ground or with an injury, and so we're able to give them that care and get them back out on their wings in the wild. For most of them, and for a certain small percentage of birds that we see, unfortunately, their injuries can be so severe that they can't go back into the wild. Maybe they have an eye injury or a wing injury that didn't quite heal right, and so they can't fly. And so it's those birds that join our team. They become the ambassadors because they can't live in the wild anymore. We give them a second chance, and we try and replicate their wild habitat as much as we can while they're here with us so that they're most comfortable. And for a certain tiny little percentage of those birds, they're sort of even better adapted to living alongside of human beings. And so we invite them to step up onto our gloved hands and meet people up close and personal. So in this case, it's going to be through the screen. You will be meeting 2 of our owl ambassadors today, which will be very, very exciting. So I'm actually going to go ahead and get our very first ambassador. His name is Troy. He'll be right here. Ready to go. What? He is ready to go. He thinks he's somewhere else. Oh, this is a new experience for Troy. All right, so I'm gonna try and get him as close to the camera as possible so you guys get a good look. He's looking at everything that's above him right now. So hopefully he'll figure out where the camera is at some point.
I don't think he ever will.
I don't think he ever will. But this is Troy, and Troy is a barred owl, B-A-R-R-E-D owl, and he's named for those bars that you see on his chest, those sort of vertical stripes that look like chocolate bars, for example. And also, if I turn him around, and you see his wingtips and his tail, they also look like they have little horizontal bars on them. And all of this contributes to his camouflage, right? So if you were to see this owl sitting up against the bark of a tree, he would blend in really, really well. So this guy, he actually ended up living with us after he had a car accident in southern New Hampshire. So he's originally from Troy, New Hampshire, and he was hit in the head by a car, which to me is amazing every day to think that he survived that at all. And he survived and got away with damage to his left eye. So if you look down inside of his left eye with a special flashlight, you can see that he's got a big scar going right across the back of his eye. And so he really can't see at all out of that. And also he's kind of a little bit more mellow than you'd expect a wild owl to be. And that just means that he doesn't have these instinctual fear reactions to things that might harm him. He just sort of takes everything in stride, which makes him a great education bird. He can meet large groups of school children like you guys today. He can be in a strange place, and he's not all that perturbed by it. But it also means that if he were in the wild and he were having to look out for predators like other larger owls that might want to eat him, he probably wouldn't do so well. So that's a little bit about why Troy is here with us. Now you probably already know a couple of things about owls, and you're probably looking at him now and making some observations about his body, about his shape. And one of the things that I hear a lot from people is that his eyes are so big and so beautiful, right? He's got these nice dark brown colored eyes. And his eyes are very large for a good reason, because owls are nocturnal, right? Nocturnal meaning they're most active at night. Now, barred owls kind of fit in a smaller category of nocturnal called crepuscular. There's your good vocabulary word for the day, where they are active mostly at dawn and dusk. So for however they're not active during the day, they're also not all that active right in the middle of the night. They're mostly up at dawn and dusk. These guys are using their large eyes to pick up tiny little amounts of light when it's dark outside, the light of the stars or the light of the moon. Because an eye is just like a window, essentially. The bigger the eyeball you have, the more light can come into it. Just like the bigger the window you have, the more light can come into a room. So he can pick up those small amounts of light due to his large eyes. But in addition to that, he's got this shiny little film in the back of his eye called the tapetum lucidum. Now, you guys might have seen this if you have cats, or maybe if you have a dog at home, or any kind of farm animal, actually. Sheep and horses have this. If you look at them in the dark, their eyes have this glow or this shine to them, like a yellowish, greenish glow. Owls have the same thing, and them it's a pinkish glow, but it's this shiny little film that helps them essentially pick up light from different directions. They have more chances to pick up light from that stars or the sliver of moon because of that shiny film bouncing the light photons around inside of their eye. Their eyes are actually about the same size as a human's eyeball, but that doesn't say much about the relative size of their eye, because Troy is an owl that weighs about 1.5 pounds. That's it. He's mostly fluff. There's not much weight to him. And so his eyes take up a significant portion of his body. If Troy was the same size as I was, he would have orange-sized eyes or tennis ball-sized eyes sitting there in his skull. And so, in fact, he's getting a little antsy even now. There's no one here. See? There's no one here. It's just a computer. He can sense the 200 people on the other side of the computer, I bet. Those eyes are so big that they actually have to be held in place by a bone. And this is very unique. They have what's called a sclerotic ring. Oh, he found the camera. Look at that. Oh. Now he sees it. they have a bone that holds their eye in its socket. And so what they can't do is move their eyeballs in their head. So you and I can look right and left and up and down without moving our head. We have some pretty good peripheral vision. But Troy, like all owls, he has to actually turn his head, and he's doing a little of it right now. He has to turn his head pretty far around in order to see in different directions. And he's capable of turning his head a little past 180. So that would be like me turning completely around with my body and still having my head facing you, 180 degrees around. Owls are kind of what we call them here at Vin's perch potatoes. They like to find a good spot to sit on a tree and wait and watch the world around them to hunt. They are not extremely active hunters overall. So he's going to sit in one spot and turn his head around looking at the forest floor and also listening for good things to eat. Now, barred owls are pretty generalist predators. They like to eat pretty much anything that comes across their path. That's why they're so common here in Vermont and in the rest of New England. They'll eat mice and rodents, of course, that's what you think of owls eating, but they'll also eat salamanders and frogs. They'll eat small birds. They'll eat crayfish. They'll even eat earthworms. And in desperate times, they might eat carrion. So they might actually scavenge for meat and eat roadkill and things like that. Because they hang out near roads in order to find the best prey, not only roadkill, but mice running out and squirrels running out across the road, barred owls are pretty commonly hit by cars around here. And so Troy is one of several hundred barred owls that Vince has treated over the years. We actually have about 12 of them in care in our hospital right now, barred owls that have various different injuries, either from being hit by cars or from not being able to find enough food. We've got about 18 inches of snow on the ground right now. I don't know how much you have up there in Canada, but it's a lot for March. And a lot of barred owls have been seen hanging around people's bird feeders in their backyards, because what's attracted to bird feeders? Mice and squirrels, chipmunks and things like that. So there's a lot of good stuff for a barred owl to eat, and it's easier to catch something that's out in the open under a bird feeder than it is to dive down through 18 inches of snow and a hard ice cover that we have right now. So that's a little bit about Troy, a little bit about owl vision, and a little bit about barred owls. I want to know if you guys have a couple of questions about him before we meet our second bird.
Actually, what I think, just to make sure it's fair for everyone, we'll do both owls first. Is that okay with you, Anna?
Yeah,
and then
that's totally fine. Troy, as you saw, he was kind of jumping off the glove just there, so I think he's getting a little bit antsy, so it's a perfect time. I'm going to sneak him back in his crate for a moment, and we will meet our second bird.
Awesome. I'm so glad he looked at the camera, too. That was amazing.
All right. So our second bird is a lot smaller, so we'll kind of hold him up to the camera here. This is an eastern screech owl. His name is Miami. He actually came to us from Miami, Florida. We tend to name our birds after where they came from. But these guys are around Vermont, which is where we are, but not as common as the barred owl. So you can see them in mainly forested areas. They really like tree cavities. They're what we call cavity nesters. That's pretty much their main habitat. Because these guys are so small, and I'm not sure if it's like quite easy to see him with the light. Because these guys are so small, they really have to blend in with their environment very well. Camouflage is their main defense, because for this guy, bigger owls are predators, raccoons, mink, any kind of mammal that could climb a tree and would love to eat meat would love to eat this little guy. So really, they focus on that camouflage. And if you look closely at his feathers, they should remind you just of the bark of a tree. Even I like to think his eyes, the color of his eyes, they're kind of this bright yellowish color. They almost look like lichen, which is the fungus algae that grows on trees. So they're really good at blending in. Not only that, but they change their size and shape depending on whether they feel comfortable or threatened. So if they feel like they're in a very, very dangerous situation, they'll actually slick all of their feathers really close to their body and stand up very tall and straight and stick their little ear tufts up in the air. And what this does is it actually pulls his silhouette into that bark of the tree that he's usually nuzzled up right against. And really, if I were to hold him up to some bark right now, he'd be almost indistinguishable from that bark. That's how good they are at blending in. And the opposite of that, they can also, if they either feel comfortable or they want to look more intimidating to something that is smaller than they are, they can actually poof up their feathers. I've seen him poof up to the size of maybe like a baseball, just a very round, fluffy feather poof, basically. So they have quite a difference in how they can change what they look like. Not only that, these guys come in two different, what we call color morphs. So not every screech owl is going to be this grayish brown that this screech owl is right now. They also come in a rufous morph is what we call them. It's kind of a reddish color. And it is completely dependent on the bark of the trees in the forest that they live in. For a screech owl like Miami, we call him a gray morph. And he's going to blend in with trees that are kind of gray in color. Now, if you have a red colored screech owl in a forest of gray trees, they're probably going to get eaten first because they don't blend in quite as well. Now, that being said, it's actually completely that little gene that determines color. It's kind of random. So you can have two gray morphed screech owls that have red morph babies and vice versa. However, we've noticed a trend in gray morph screech owls tend to be more northerly, and red morph screech owls tend to be more southerly. Miami is a bit of an exception because he is a gray morph screech owl from Florida. Not only that, but the very southern tip of Florida. Now, he's actually a Floridian subspecies, so he's a little bit smaller than the screech owls we have around here. Not only that, but he has less feathers on his feet because of the warm climate that Florida has. He doesn't need quite as many feathers to keep him warm there. Now, Miami has a similar story to Troy for why he's here. He actually has an eye injury as well. He's completely blind in his right eye, but the way he got that injury is a little bit different. Troy was hit by a car. Miami was actually a little tiny owlet, which is the term we call young owls. He was up in a tree in a nest cavity on someone's property, and they wanted that tree cut down. So they didn't realize there was a nest of baby owls in that tree, and Miami hit his head pretty hard on the way down. So that's how he got that blind injury, and also he has some neurologic damage as well.
Can they hear his trills?
Yeah, can you guys hear his trills? He's making sounds.
Yeah. Incredible.
So the sound he's making is called a trill. I like to think that's either a startled noise or an anticipation kind of noise. He makes it whenever something new or different is changing in his environment. The other sound that screech owls tend to make is something called a whinny, and it sounds kind of like a horse, but more whistly than that. A wee, but much more whistly. Which is interesting because when you think about owls, normally you think about a hooting kind of sound, but really it tends to go, the bigger owls are the hooters, and then the smaller owls are either screechers or they'll make little toots. So, and the other interesting thing about a screech owl and their sounds is they're called screech owl, right? But they don't really have a screeching kind of sound that they make, at least not the eastern screech owl. I've been told the western screech owl, which is fairly similar. I think the only difference is you can find them in the western part of the United States, and there's a bit of a size difference, but they might make a bit of a screeching sound. in comparison with this guy. All right.
Bring Troy on back.
Yeah, so we're going to bring Troy on back. And then if you guys have any questions, we'll be glad to answer them.
Outstanding, ladies. Thank you so much. That was amazing. All right. Before we get started with classes, I want to know we've got a few groups watching on YouTube Live as well, so you guys can type in your questions there, and I'll pass them on to the team at the VINs. So please do type them in. But yeah, let's get started as they're getting the Troy back with us, and start with Miss Langer's class. If you guys have a question about the facility or owls or anything else, come on up. Anyone want to ask about owls? We can always come back. Let's come back in a minute, okay, guys?
All right. He's like not having it with Troy right now. Yeah.
All right. Well, while you're sorting out owl politics, Miss Gary's class, if you guys have a question.
Do owls stay in pairs?
That's a very good question. So owls, as most birds do, they mate for life. They will find one partner and raise a family with that partner. And then throughout the summer, as their babies grow up and maybe disperse to other places, in the fall, those two owls will find separate places to spend the winter. But in the spring, they come back together with the same owl. So every spring they pair up, but then they tend not to stay in that pair all year round, if that makes sense.
Yeah, very cool. All right, there's someone in Miss Langer's class. If you guys have a question, yeah, you're good to go.
Nice and loud.
How many species of owls are there?
How
Nice
many
and loud.
species of owls are there? So, in the whole world, there are about 220 species of owls. In North America, there are about 19.
Wow. Do you know where, sorry, just quick follow-up, do you know where there's the most of them? Because that's a really low percentage.
Yeah, and North America has like the lowest percentage of all the things. I would hazard a guess that Southeast Asia has the most species of owls.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, guys. Great question.
Yeah.
All right, Ms. McNeil's group. You guys have a question?
We sure do.
Everyone has a question, it looks like.
Hey.
My friend Sarah here is going to ask a question. Sarah, would you like to ask it?
How big can they grow up to?
Did you hear that?
No.
Oh, how big can they grow up to?
Yeah.
Okay.
So both of these owls are fully grown.
Yep.
Believe it or not, Miami is 3, and he's not getting bigger than that.
Yeah.
Same thing, honestly, with Troy here. He's a medium-sized owl, you'd say. The largest species of owl in the world is probably, and I say probably because I've heard other things about it, but probably the Eurasian eagle owl, which is found in Northern Europe and Asia, and they can grow up to weigh about 6 or 8 pounds. And they stand like I would be holding my glove down here, and the head would be like here.
Yeah, those guys are pretty massive.
Right.
The tallest owl in the world is the great gray, though.
Ah, yes.
But they're just feathers. Like they don't weigh anything in comparison with the Eurasian eagle owl.
Yeah. And they are a North American owl.
Yeah.
The great gray.
Yeah. It's really interesting. Several times in the presentation, you mentioned puffing up feathers. If I urge the classes to look up an owl without feathers, which you don't want to find in the wild, you want to find them with feathers, but it's a really, you'd never expect it. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
If I were to poke Troy, and I will not because he doesn't like that, but if I were to poke him in the side of the head, my finger would disappear up to about here in feathers. It's like 1.5 inches deep of feathers.
Awesome. Actually, we're going to go back to Ms. McNeil's class just because I know you guys brought in several classes, so I want to give you guys a chance to ask a second question, and then we'll continue on, okay?
Thank you. So we have one more over here.
How old can a baby owl fly?
Oh, how old before a baby owl can fly?
Oh. It depends
When
on
they get their feathers
When they get their
in.
feathers
Yeah.
in. That's when. It depends on the species. The larger owls take longer to grow up, and the smaller ones take a shorter time. Miami was probably able to fly when he was 4 or 5 weeks old. Like a month. That's it.
Yeah.
Troy, probably similar, something like 5 or 6 weeks old. And that eagle owl we were talking about, maybe it would take them more like 2 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That being said, when owls are young and before they can even fly, they'll like venture out of their nest and they'll start exploring tree branches, and they've been seen like climbing up trees with their beak in their talons and kind of waving their featherless wings around.
You call them branchers at that point. They can't quite fly, but they're out of the nest and going places.
They're causing trouble. I urge the classes to look that up too. There's some great videos online. Owls or birds in general just learning to fly is a really amazing thing, beautiful to see. So do check that out. Miss Alexander's class, if you guys have a question, come on up.
How long can owls live for?
Ooh, very good question.
Depends on the species. A screech owl can live to about, well, 15 is a good old age for them.
Yes, very much. Yeah. And a barred owl can live a bit longer. Again, it kind of scales with the size of the bird. So Troy being a larger bird, barred owls can live to be over 20 years old. Troy himself, we think he's probably not much older than 7. He arrived at VINS in 2012, so that would be 7 years ago. And we think he probably was a young bird at the time, but we had no way of knowing for certain. We do have another resident barred owl on site. Her name is Milton, and she was retired from programming because we thought she's done her duties. She's 22 years old. She doesn't have to do programs anymore. She's still with us. She's 27 now.
Yep.
He just gets pudding now. That's perfect.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yes,
She's
exactly.
blind in both eyes.
And she's still hooting with all the male barred owls on our campus, the wild ones.
Yeah.
Awesome, guys. All right, let's get to Miss Brady's class. If you guys have a question.
Did you have one? No. Okay, go ahead, Mia. Nice and loud.
Is Miami ever going to be able to go back in the wild because of his head and eye injury?
So Miami is never going to be a wild bird. Not only because he's blind in his right eye, but because he has some neurologic damage as well. He wouldn't be able to hunt as efficiently without the use of his depth perception. Yeah,
and also worth noting that the birds that you see and the birds that you would see if you would come to visit us at VINS are non-releasable, and that's why we have trained them, put them on gloves, bring them out in front of people, is because they don't have a potential to go back in the wild. If they did, we wouldn't have trained them to do this. We wouldn't want them to be comfortable with people, because a wild animal that's too comfortable with people is a wild animal that's going to get hurt.
Yeah.
Great answer. Quick follow-up. You mentioned that there are a lot of birds that come in that people just bring into you guys, hummingbirds, chickadees, whatever. Are those released to the wild if they can?
Yes.
Yeah. Our rehab has, I think, a 43% release rate, which is, I think, a little bit higher than the national average for avian rehab. We try to release as many birds as we can. That is the ultimate goal. Get them back into the wild.
It's always, at the end of the day, you want them to go back, and you'll do everything to make sure that an individual can go back into the wild. And it's we don't look for birds to put into our education program, for example.
Yeah.
All right. We got a question from online from Team DD in Paris, Ontario, a class, and they want to ask, what's the most endangered owl, if you know offhand?
Here in North America, it's the spotted owl, which is in the Pacific Northwest, Oregon, Washington, Northern California. They are on the endangered species list. The world over, I really don't know enough to answer that question.
Yeah. I also don't know about the entire world. Spotted owls are, I think, the only North American owl species listed as endangered.
There are 2 subspecies, worth knowing, there are 2 subspecies of spotted owl, the northern and the Mexican. They're the same species, but they're in 2 different regions. They're both very critically endangered. Yeah.
Good answer. All right, Miss Wagner's class, you guys have a question?
What owls would we be able to see in New Jersey?
So hoping we got that question.
And New Jersey.
So definitely barred owls.
This guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great horned owls. Maybe screech
Screech
owls.
owls,
Yeah,
yes.
you'd find screech owls.
Northern saw-whet, which is an owl that's even smaller than Miami.
If you can imagine that.
They're there. What else? Short and long-eared owls as well. And we have those up here in Vermont. Probably not great grays. They stay a little bit farther north. That being said, every so often, every couple of winters, some great gray owls, which are normally up in the boreal forests in Canada, will come down south looking for food, looking for territory. And that's the same with snowy owls too. So even though it's hard to picture a snowy owl in New Jersey, it can happen.
Last year, there was a snowy owl eruption. So a lot of snowy owls were going further south than they ever had before. And we heard of one that found its way to North Carolina. So that's really far for a snowy owl to go. So you can sometimes find them in New Jersey as well.
That, of course, and barn owls. We've been talking about barred owls, but there's the barn, B-A-R-N owl, that are common in New Jersey as well.
Did you call it an eruption? Wow, that's a great term. That's all.
So the biological eruption is I-R-R-U-P-T-I-O-N, not like.
Oh, okay.
Basically, it's when, like, in that ecosystem in the Arctic, there were like a lot of Arctic lemmings. There was a good year for that, which means the owls were eating more, which means they were having more offspring. And then once the winter hit, all those young owls that grew up into adults had to compete for space and food. So it was pushing them further and further down south.
Last question from our first round from Miss Reed's class. If you guys have one, come on up.
Question. Oh, great.
Yeah, hey, no worries, all good.
Okay, go ahead, Sal.
Wait, that's a canal.
No.
Nice, Mike.
Go ahead.
Fancy.
Sal, just go ahead. Go ahead.
Do Miami and Troy eat the same food?
Here at Vin's, yes.
In the wild, they'd both be going after small rodents like mice, for sure. Miami would go after the really small mice.
Miami would also probably eat a lot more insects than Troy would.
Yeah.
He can get more calories out of a bug. Troy would be like, that's just a tiny little snack.
Yeah, that being said,
Also, a tiny little
frogs.
snack for Troy would be that.
Yeah, it's true.
They eat each other.
But they might also go after like frogs, like tree frogs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Salamanders. Small birds are kind of a challenge for these guys. They're not very agile flyers, but if they can surprise a sleeping songbird, they'll eat that.
Yeah.
Great question. Can I just say for the classes, like, great questions from all of you guys and from Vin's. Like, you have to understand how rare it is that when all the questions get asked, especially about animals and animals around the world, that the people know the answer. So way to go to you two, and thank you so much for that. All right, we're going to take a question online. So this is Mr. Prezio's grade 4's Holy Family School class. Do wild owls do anything for entertainment or fun? Interesting question.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for congratulating us on knowing the answers and then giving us a question that we don't know the answer.
That's one of those things where you can't like ask an owl, what do you do for fun? And it's hard to interpret what fun is.
It's hard. So generally, like in behavioral biology, when scientists study the behavior of animals, one indication of intelligence is play, is when animals seem to do an action that doesn't have any meaning. It's just like, oh, they're flipping a stick in the air up and up over and over again. That looks like they're playing. That looks like they're having fun. And it can generally be correlated with the intelligence of the animal. Then again, most behavioral scientists that I know are humans, and humans are social. And we pay attention to other animals that are social, and we understand when other animals interact with members of their own species. Owls are solitary. They don't, except when they're paired off and breeding, they don't hang out with other owls. And so if they have, a kind of intelligence, we're not very well equipped to understand it. So I'm not sure that they do play. And I'm not sure if they did, we would be able to recognize what it was. Then again, that's just my kind of like very general guesswork about the experience of an owl's life.
That being said, I have noticed with our owls that they sometimes, if we take them outside on a nice sunny day, they're a lot calmer if they're like right in the sun. So I think I make a guess and say they like to bask in the sun.
Yeah, that's probably fair.
Hey, great answer, guys, and difficult question. Worth noting for the class is some of the birds that we have seen play: parrots, crows, some of the like known birds to be very, very intelligent. There's a great video of crows taking the snowboarding down a hill.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
Back up and going to the top and sliding down. So again, check that out when you're done. Well, we're running through these guys, so let's do a whole other round of questions. We'll start with Miss Langer's class for the student who's been patiently waiting the whole time. Yeah, you're good. Good.
How many babies can they have up to, and how long do they stay with their parents?
Okay.
Excellent question. So again, that's another one where it kind of just like correlates with the size of the bird. The smaller the bird in general, the more eggs they lay. But that can be totally outside that trend if you are interruptive birds like a snowy owl. So for example, I would expect Miami to lay 5, 6 eggs, if he was a female.
He's not.
Troy's wife or lady partner would probably lay 3 or 4 eggs by comparison. And then an eagle owl might lay 1 or 2 eggs, and that's all. Snowy owls, it depends for them on how much prey is available. So living up in the Arctic, they feed mostly on lemmings, and lemmings can be either super abundant, just like you got to watch your step because you'll step on a lemming, or they could be just pretty, normally spread out across the landscape. And so a snowy owl in a super abundant lemming year have been known to lay 17 eggs in a nest. And they're a fairly large owl. So that's a lot of babies to feed, but if there are enough lemmings, they can get away with it.
Very cool. Thank you, guys.
The other part of that question was, how long do they stay with their parents?
Yeah.
That again depends on the species, but it can be several months. It can be several months into the fall of that year.
Awesome. All right. Gary's class.
Okay, go ahead, Selma.
How many animals can you find in a pellet?
Wow.
Ooh. So voles and mice,
Yeah.
lots of small rodents.
Yeah.
Bird
bones show up in owl pellets. Generally, an owl will cough up 1 pellet a day. And so that means that whatever's in the pellet was what they ate that day. So if they eat 6 animals, they're going to be the bones of 6 animals in that pellet. I don't know what's like a...
Yeah. That being said, like the sizes of pellets can vary depending on how much they ate. So if they only ate like 1 mouse, the pellet's going to be small. If they ate like 3 or 4, the pellet's going to be a lot larger. Mm-hmm. You'd be surprised what you can find in there.
Oh, yeah.
Quick follow-up to that. So the owl just can't process that part of the food, and then they cough it up. And do other birds make pellets as well, or just owls?
So they do. Hawks make pellets and falcons make pellets, but the reason why you never dissect those in your classrooms is because they're not as fun. If you dissect a hawk pellet or a falcon pellet, all you're going to find is fur and feathers. These guys can't digest bone. Their stomach is just, I don't think,
it's not as acidic
for it. So therefore the bone gets all compacted into that pellet.
Thanks, ladies. We had a class actually dissect owl pellets before this hangout just to prepare for it. So that was super exciting.
Yeah.
Very good.
All right, let's head to Miss McNeil's group.
Hi there. Okay, so I've got right here. Go ahead, Davin.
Are there any owls who hunt in the day?
Oh, yeah.
This guy.
Yeah. Nocturnal is a trend, not a rule with owls. And there are some species that are positively diurnal, which means they're active during the day and they sleep at night. Things like burrowing owls and snowy owls, indeed. The snowy owl one, that was funny when I remember learning about that and just thinking about, well, where does a snowy owl live? Mm-hmm. They live in the Arctic. And in the summer, in the Arctic, the sun never sets. They have 24-hour daylight because they're so far up there. So when would a nocturnal animal get to hunt if it's 24-hour daylight? So the thing that they do, which is my new favorite phrase, is they hunt during theoretical night. They hunt when it's nighttime elsewhere in the world, but it's light out. So they can't be described as nocturnal. So yeah, there are owls that hunt during the daytime, just out of the need to do so. Yes.
Very cool. We got a question online. So that is, how far can owls see?
That's an interesting one.
Is it the same for hawks?
Probably very similar, if not exactly the same as for the hawks and falcons.
So I don't know the exact number distance, but my favorite picture of how far they can see is if you put a newspaper on the ground and then run up to the top of a 7-story building and look down, an owl would be able to read the newspaper.
Yeah.
Very cool.
So it's 2 to 3 at least times better than a human being's vision.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Great answer. All right, let's go to Miss Alexander's class.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
When did owls first appear on Earth?
Ooh, that's a great question.
That's a question for you.
Yeah, and I don't want to misquote any numbers, but the first fossilized owls that we find in the fossil record, they look like barn owls, because barn owls are kind of a more ancient lineage of owls than these two guys are. They're often their own family. I want to say it's about 30 million years ago is the first like proto-owl, the first owl that was kind of owl-like, but it probably wasn't the same as a barred owl or a screech owl. These guys are probably way more modern than that. Like a couple 100,000 years have they looked exactly the way that they do now.
Outstanding. By comparison, for students to know, proto-humans appeared about 6 million years ago. So owls are 5 times older than, the origins of us.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So let's go to Miss Brady's class. If you guys have a question.
So I hear that owls are smart. Is that true?
So they are as smart as they need to be,
yes,
is what I will say.
Yes.
But the misconception that owls are smart or wise actually stems back to Greek mythology. The Greek goddess Athena was the goddess of wisdom, and her chosen owl, or her chosen animal was an owl.
Mm-hmm.
I forget what kind of owl.
I don't know.
There's
on little Greek coins.
Yeah, they're little Greek coins, and they have owls on them for Athens, I believe, which is the chosen city of Athena.
Yeah.
So I think it stems back to they look like they have very large heads, and they do in fact have very large heads. And so you'd imagine that then they have very large brains, and that they use their brains for thinking about philosophy and mathematics, but not really. A lot of their brain is devoted to vision. Because their eyes are so big, they need a lot of visual processing power. So they're as smart as they need to be.
Okay. All right, we have time for 2 more questions. So let's go to Miss Wagner's class.
Go ahead, Sia.
Why did you want to start to study about owls?
Oh, very good question. You wanna take your career path first?
Sure. Yeah, I've always liked birds, and it's something that I've always been interested in. And on a whim, I actually started really studying birds and being into owls when I started working here at the Vermont Institute of Natural Science about 1.5 years ago. Yeah.
I've always been obsessed with birds, and I saw a presentation much like this one when I was about 11 years old with a woman who had a barn owl on her glove, and I thought, that's what I want to do when I grow up.
And then you worked your
Here
entire
I am.
life towards it.
Yeah, pretty much. So it was an owl that first got me into this. But to be perfectly brutally honest, and apologies to my colleague, owls are not my favorite thing to study. I'm much more partial to the hawks and the falcons. No offense, Troy.
Yeah,
I
feel that. I'm into echinoderms, so
Yeah.
sea stars and urchins.
She's a marine biologist, really.
Yeah.
When both of you said that you preferred other animals, the owls looked at you. I really urge you to watch the YouTube video. It's absolutely hilarious.
I will. Yeah.
How
dare you?
Great answer, guys. Let's wrap up with a question from Miss Reed's class. And go right ahead.
What are owls scared of?
What are owls scared of? Bigger owls.
Bigger owls.
Yeah, so you can actually see Miami is a little bit nervous now. His feathers are pretty slicked and his ear tufts are really up in the air because Troy is right next to him.
And watch, watch Miami's face. I'm gonna walk around the back of Anna and appear on the other side.
We'll see how this.
Oh, now Miami's got to watch Troy because he's on this side.
So yeah, bigger owls is definitely something that they're afraid of. It really depends on the size of the owl, actually.
Fear isn't. It's a useful thing. It's a useful thing for them to be afraid because then they'll, mobilize and get away from something dangerous. But saying that maybe they fear getting hit by a car is giving them, I think, too much credit. They don't really understand what cars are, and so that's why they get hit. Yeah. All
right. Before we wrap up, so 2 quick questions that I want to make sure all the classes understand. Where can they learn more information about the work you guys do and owls in general?
Totally. Very good question. So our website is vinsweb.org. You can learn more about our organization there. But there are many, many great resources about owls on the internet. I would suggest a good starting point is the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. They have a whole website called All About Birds, and you can learn about the individual species of any bird, but specifically, they've got a lot of information about owls on there.
Excellent. And then one last question, which we sort of touched on earlier with the New Jersey question, was how can you find owls? So like me personally, I love birds. I've seen a lot of birds. I've never seen an owl. Is there a way that you go about?
Yes. Ooh, okay. All right. Maybe Troy's gonna go back.
Yeah, we're gonna switch sides again.
A little hairy. Yeah.
So basically, the way to search for owls is, well, 1, learn what owls live near you.
Yep.
That's the first step. 2, I would say start learning owl calls. There are certain owls, like barred owls, that will actually do call-in responses. And then look for the habitat that they would be in. So for a barred owl, you'd go to a forested area.
Near water is helpful.
Near water.
And to learn their call, which is very distinctive. There's actually a little mnemonic that goes along with the barred owl call. They say, who cooks for you? Who cooks for you all? And so if you want to go home and practice your hooting and go, whoo, 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 and then stand out in the woods near dusk, you can maybe see if you will attract a barred owl who's essentially hearing your call and going, hey, who's in my woods all of a sudden? This is my territory.
After you hear that call and response and know that they're there, then you can probably go back and look around to about where you heard that sound. If you see whitewash on the tree, which is actually just the bird poop coming down from the nest cavity, that's an indicator, or pellets on the ground. Now, once you see an owl, they blend in really well. So you really have to play a game of Where's Waldo and see if you can pick out the rounded head of an owl.
The first step is hearing them. The second step is seeing them. All right. Troy's all done, so I'm going to put him away.
Okay.
All right. I want to get the owls back to the thing. So what I want to do too is at the end of every hangout, we are going to, boys and girls, if you guys can get ready, I'm going to demute everyone's microphones. If you could join me in saying a huge thank you. I'm going to also make sure your mics are not too loud, but you don't want to scare the owls. But yeah, everyone, so Miss Langer's class, Miss Gary's class, Miss McNeil, everyone's muted. So yeah, just join me in saying a big thank you to Anna and Anna.
You're not jumping.
Thank you.
Do it.
Awesome, guys. Great questions from all the classes. Thank you so much. Anna, that was amazing. Thank you so much for bringing out Troy and Miami. That was awesome, guys.
Thank you for having us.
All right. We look very forward to having you back soon. I'm going to pass information about the site and more to our classes when we're done. So you guys can look for that. And for now, have a wonderful